Hi all, welcome to The Wife of Caesar. My name is Chilean or Chilean, either's fine. As you know, The Wife of Caesar is Streiner's project to talk about corruption or anti-corruption using everyday words so that we can fight corruption in our day-to-day lives with a little bit more than just good intentions. Okay, as usual, we will have a piece of news, a case, and a typology. Today's news deals with Chile, but not in the way that you might expect. Today, Chile, the Chilean Undersecretary of State Property was removed from her position by the president of Chile. Apparently, she was misusing or abusing her position as Undersecretary of State or Undersecretary of Property by promising people deeds to the land that they occupied in exchange for them joining their political party, which is obviously very, very wrong. Now, what happened here is that a legislator, a congresswoman from Chile, filed an official report before the state prosecutor denouncing the alleged acts of corruption of this Undersecretary of Property. In response to this, the president of Chile publicly demanded that the Undersecretary tender her resignation, which she obviously did, and she has now been removed from her office. Now, this might seem pretty harmless or actually quite adequate in the fight against corruption, but this is very much nuanced because, as you know, the context in Chile is quite complicated right now. Chile is in a very delicate political situation. There have been riots and open protesting in the street, sometimes violent, because the people are rising up against the government. It all began with the government raising the prices of public transportation, which actually is quite expensive in Chile. And this led to other protests where people were manifesting their discontent with the public policies implemented by the government. So the president has been trying to manage this crisis very inadequately, I might add. And this firing or this resignation of the Undersecretary for Acts of Corruption comes at a moment where it benefits the president the most, because he might gain some political capital by acting or, appearing to enforce the principles of legality and upholding the law. So again, there is a slight conflict of interest. More so, this is still at the very earliest stages of investigation. As you know, when you figure out or when you have an idea that a crime has been committed, you report it to the authorities, then the authorities have to investigate, and that investigation might lead to an indictment, which is essentially taking you to court. After the trial, after you go to court, then you might be found guilty, but only until then. This is a process that might take, years. And this only happened within days. So it's a very, executive or extremely fast-tracked process. Again, very, very suspicious. So this political action of the resignation of the Undersecretary of Chile has to be nuanced and taken with a grain of salt, because please remember that the president very desperately needs political capital, and that the Undersecretary has not yet been investigated nor taken to court. So again, this is kind of bittersweet news. Let's move on to the case. Today we get to talk about the Obiang family of Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea is a country in Africa, one of the few Spanish-speaking countries that are outside of the Spanish Peninsula and Latin America, and because it was a colony until the late 60s, a colony of Spain until the late 60s, and it is a country whose main product is oil, petroleum oil. Now, this means that this is one of the richest countries, or has one of the highest per capita income in all of Africa. However, about 75% of the people of Equatorial Guinea live in extreme poverty, which is kind of a paradox. It doesn't make sense, but it will in a minute. The Obiang family, Teodoro Obiang, has been the president of Equatorial Guinea for about 40 years. Now, he has a son, and his name is Teodorin. That's his name. And he has served several offices This is obviously nepotism, but he has performed several public offices throughout his life, and today, currently, he is the vice president of Equatorial Guinea. This also means that if and when the president dies, the vice president will now take the office of president. So again, very suspicious. Now, Teodorino Obiang has been famous or infamous for exhibiting a lavish lifestyle on social media, mainly Instagram. He parades himself in yachts, partying with models, using supercars, cars worth about $1 million. You've only seen them in movies. And this has drawn the attention of several authorities from different countries. Now, he has been accused, investigated, and processed in at least 4 countries: the US, the UK, France, Switzerland, some investigations in Brazil. And in all of these countries, they have carried out a legal process and even imposed penalties on Obiang of many, many $1 million. But he seemingly has unending wealth. I'll give you a few examples. In the US, he was processed for corruption and money laundering, and the Department of Justice seized around $30 million in funds. Same thing happened in France. He was investigated for acts of corruption and money laundering, and the government of France seized around $30 million. In Switzerland, the government, because of indictments of money laundering, the government of Switzerland confiscated a supercar collection of his worth, again, $30 million. And it was the Brazilian authorities, the customs authority discovered that the delegation, the diplomatic delegation of Obiang was trying to enter the country with $16 million in cash and several luxury watches, which they also confiscated. But he still seems to live a very lavish lifestyle. So where are these funds? Now, what people know in Equatorial Guinea and around the world is that the Obiang family has embezzled around $1 billion from the wealth of the nation. So these confiscations of $30–40 million do very little in the way of providing reparations to the people of Equatorial Guinea. Of course, him being the vice president of a country has diplomatic immunity, so he cannot be processed in several countries. And he, of course, will not be processed anytime soon in Equatorial Guinea because the authorities are very much in his favor. As soon as any new developments in this case come to light, we will let you know. But to be honest, I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. Okay, let's move on to the typology. Today we will talk about quid pro quo, but not in the sense of, President Donald Trump and all of that. When we talk about quid pro quo, we mean an exchange. Quid pro quo literally means in Latin this for that, or one thing for the other. What happens in a lot of cases of corruption is that it's not always as easy because, the authorities have resources. It's not always easy to pay a bribe. So what tends to happen is that there's this sort of untold, unspoken agreement among the corrupt that they sort of trust each other to make good on their promises eventually. So what happens a lot of the time is I will give you whatever benefit you desire from me, whatever improper benefit you want to obtain. And later down the line, you will provide to me an improper benefit of money, privilege, whatever. And I'll give you an example because this sounds very abstract. I'll give you an example. When a presidential candidate runs for office and effectively wins the election, there is a period of time during which he no longer is a candidate, but he also isn't the president. That's when we call him president-elect. During this time, he does not represent the government in any capacity. He's just, he holds the title of president-elect, but that doesn't really mean anything. Now, he obviously cannot make expenditures in the name of the government, and he presumably doesn't have a lot of money to throw around. But what does happen, very strangely, is that as soon as they take office, the entire image of the presidency is automatically revamped. New image, new appearance, different fonts, different logos, the whole shebang. Now, this has to be paid for by someone. And because campaign contributions are very heavily regulated pretty much all around the world, what happens is that these people, the people that provide the services, graphic design and all of that, donate their services to the candidate, or apparently seemingly donate the services to the candidate. However, down the line, midterm, 2-3 years down the line, they magically are they receive the benefit of being awarded a government contract worth many millions of dollars. And this is the improper exchange of, I will give you this service for free today, and then later down the line, you give me an improper benefit. And it's very hard to define these or to find a connection between these two, because they in appearance, they seem to be transparent. So whenever we face this sort of donation or these benefits that seemingly are unpaid, we have to ask ourselves who benefits from this transaction, and not only in the short term, but also in the mid and long terms. When we find who benefits going one way, in this case, the president, and then going the other way, in this case, the service provider and, graphic designers and whatnot, we might find the common thread that unites these acts and turns the whole thing into an act of corruption. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for having us and for joining us. I will leave you, as I always do, with this. Every act of corruption has to be reported and denounced. Please blow the whistle, but do so safely. If you're not sure whether or not what you're looking at is corruption, or you're not entirely sure that you are physically safe, don't do anything, refrain from acting. Feel free to reach out to us at info@streiner.mx, and we will be glad to help you. But above all, please stay safe. Again, this was The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michele Bien, or Michele Bien, either's fine, and have a happy Tuesday.